Welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios in Norman, Oklahoma, Campus Quarter. We have Josh McCuistion back from a Disney vacation last week. You survived. Congratulations on that. It is a little bit of a somber day here in Norman, Oklahoma, in the state of Oklahoma, as we mourn the loss of Toby Keith. He passed away overnight. Had cancer and had been fighting. And, gentlemen, welcome into the program. Another recruiting report. We'll get to a bunch of stuff here shortly. Oklahoma with a commitment in the 2025 ranks. We're recapping a junior day, going a little bit back into some of the on-3 final rankings for the 2024 class. But certainly a sad day here for the state of Oklahoma, as well as certainly the University of Oklahoma with the loss of Toby Keith.
Yeah, tough, man. He's somebody that, Eddie, I know that you've sat next to him quite a bit down there at the LNC.
He was a
he's
staple.
Always been,
staple.
He's been at every sporting event, whether it was basketball, football. You saw him all the time at football games. Just a sad day. And I think the thing that you remember about him is, obviously people are going to remember his music across the world, but I think here in Oklahoma is that he was always very approachable. I know when I met him for the first time, it was at a women's basketball game. I was a student reporter in 2016, and he just shook my hand and said, "Hey, I'm familiar with your work." And I was like, "You're familiar with my work?" I was like, "I'm familiar with your work." And so I think that him always having that friendly personality, a friend to the program. I know that a lot of people, coaches, administrators, players even, were very close with Toby Keith. So just really a sad day, I think, for the university, as well as just the state of Oklahoma and people that got to meet him.
No doubt. And, I think that, on top of everything, and I think it's something that we see oftentimes when somebody passes, that you see all the stories and everything, all the kind of the tributes and memories that people share on social media. Certainly, I think it kind of brings it all into perspective. A larger than life figure that, certainly at all of the Oklahoma sporting events, and particularly football and basketball, both sides, men's and women's, certainly softball, as it became kind of a tradition in downtown Oklahoma City to celebrate the national championship victories for Patty Gasso and the Oklahoma softball team, who opens their season on Thursday down in Puerto Vallarta. Certainly he was a prominent role in all of that, not to mention everything that he did in terms of, community outreach, just in the more, community, obviously, where he grew up. And then certainly, statewide, as far as the Toby Keith Foundation and pediatric cancer, that he had really kind of spurred that entire thing. So certainly a sad day. And, our thoughts and prayers are with his family today, as, they mourn the loss of a husband, a father, and, everything else, and a bunch of friends that, you just open up the media or social media today, and I'm sure that you're going to see some type of tribute from somebody that, we certainly all, I guess, look up to as far as, prominent members of the state of Oklahoma. So certainly sad, and there's no easy way to transition any of this, but this is the recruiting report. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. There's been a bunch going on, Josh. I think, believe it or not, even though that we are, I guess upon a dead period now in terms of recruiting, it's been a busy month for Oklahoma coaches, sending out a ton of new offers, which you had recapped. I think it was, 39 guys, 2 weeks ago, and loads more here. Let's just start here. I think that this is probably where we need to really get into the entirety of this, and that is the final on 2024 rankings for the class. And I know that there was a lot of people, myself included, that were not very excited about where David Stone ends up. But, Josh, I guess just let's start there. We've seen some of the comments from the national guys just in terms of why and, the reasons for David Stone's final ranking. But how did you, I guess, take in all of that? And I guess where do you kind of stand on everything?
Yeah, and I was there with, our guys, Charles Power, Cody Belair at On 3. And at the Under Armour game is where they really watch David have the most exposure to him. And I'll be honest, I don't really know how you watched that and came away with the feelings they did. But it's one of those things where reasonable people can disagree. That's okay. It's not a thing where there's any I know Cody. I've talked with him several times. We hung out in San Antonio a little bit the following week, and I had an inkling this was coming. Like I thought a fall was probably coming. And like I said, if it would have happened coming off a bad performance, it's a little easier to understand. David was outstanding. He was again, outstanding at the Poly Bowl in Hawaii. From everybody that I talked to there, so it's one of those things that I get why Oklahoma fans are frustrated. It's tough to reconcile it. At the same time, I understand the argument that they're making that David Stone is not like I had a chance to look at David and Dominic McKinley next to each other. Dominic McKinley is a different type of athlete in the way he's put together. He is a 6'5", 260-pound, long rangy guy that has all the potential in the world. But as of right now, is not the player that David Stone is. What they're betting on is that potential, and they're a little concerned of how much farther can David Stone go. And so I'm not saying I agree with that sentiment. I'm saying I can understand what their thought process is. But for me, I mean, the thing I would remind OU fans, they think he's a 5-star. They still think he is a first-round draft pick eventually. When's the last time we could say that about an Oklahoma defensive lineman? So they still view David Stone as a very elite prospect, just maybe not as high as myself or OU fans feel he should be placed.
Josh, this may be a stupid question, but can you explain to people why these rankings do matter, or why maybe they don't matter? Because I feel like there's some people out there that are on one side of the fence like, well, who really cares? We like David Stone. That doesn't matter. And then there's other people out there that's like, no, we need him to be ranked in the top 10 or whatever.
Sure. The do matter is an easy argument. The better players want to play with other great players. That's very simple. Now, do I think that suddenly a player is going to feel David Stone's not as good because he's number 29 instead of like number 17 where he is on 24/7? No, I don't think that has any relationship. But I get the argument for why these things do matter and why there is some value placed by fans. But to me, I really like the industry rankings that On3 does. I know 24/7 does the composite. I like those because they aggregate a lot of different inputs, a lot of different people that have seen these guys and can come from different points of view. You know, okay, this guy's ranking was affected by, you know, we saw him on a bad night or we saw him on a great night, and it can get skewed. But when you go across 4 networks, it's a little tougher for that to get out of control or really out of whack. So that's something I like about it. As far as why they don't, that's equally easy. It doesn't change who David Stone is. He could be a 3-star and he's still the same physical talent and has the same physical ability that he does if he's ranked the number 1 player in the country. That doesn't change anything. And that's why I'm always big. I know we'll talk about OU's new commitment here in a little while, but I'm big on watch the tape. Don't just let the rankings tell you what's what. Look at what's there on tape. Look at the raw traits and kind of go from there. And I know some people don't have either the time or the expertise. Like I understand that, but a ranking is not foolproof by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm one who feels like if you're not landing top 10 classes, it's tough to win national titles. So it's a two-sided argument. I get it. We could spend 30 minutes talking about this, but it is. I mean, like they both do matter and they both don't matter. Like those things can kind of both be true.
Just in terms of to throw the numbers out there, David Stone finishes as a 5-star, as you said, Josh, number 29 player overall in the country, the number 4 defensive tackle. If you're talking about the industry rankings, he finishes in the top 10 overall, number 9, and the number 1 defensive lineman in the country, which, you know, I've said this before on the unofficial 40 when we've been talking about rankings. Like, if you're disputing between the number 29 player and the number 17 player, or, you know, whatever you want to talk about, just in terms of top 30, top 50, we're talking about the top 50 players in the country that play high school football. I mean, he's still an excellent football player, just the same as, Nigel Smith or Jaden Jackson or whoever that's coming in this much heralded defensive line class in the 2024 group, who, by the way, most of them are already on campus. They'll be starting spring ball here before we know it. But it's all subjective, but at the same time, I don't think that there's anybody walking away or looking at the On3 rankings when they came out and saying, well, we don't expect David Stone to be, one of the next great defensive tackles at the University of Oklahoma. It's just funny how you kind of get caught up in that. And then on the flip side of that, you have somebody in Danny Okoye who ended up a little bit higher on On3 than other places.
Yeah, and I mean, and I can say, I mean, guys, especially, Eddie, you and I've worked together a long time. I'm not one that gets wound up about rankings.
Sure.
Like, I'll give my input, I'll tell you what I think, but I'm not one that lives and dies with where a guy's ranked. And I think sometimes you see that. Like, you can see when maybe a site tries to exert a lot of influence and that kind of stuff. And that's just not who I'm going to be. Like, I'm going to tell you what I think, and we're going to go from there. But there are a few guys through the years I've kind of stood on the table for. Danny Okoye, I wouldn't say I had to push that hard, but there was definitely a tone for me over the last month or so where I'm like, guys, this guy is really special. Like, I can't begin to tell you how athletically gifted he is. I know, talking with Gabe and Teddy, I mentioned he was the guy that I thought might have the most upside of any player in the class. Danny Okoye has first round ability as a defensive end. He's that special, and I think the ranking is absolutely justified. If they'd went higher, I wouldn't have argued with that. But to me, there's no question with his physical tools and just his frame, his speed, his athleticism, all the traits that he has that just are starting to be honed. Like that's the thing that's amazing about Danny. He's all that he is almost on his own. And I don't say that as a slight to the Noah program. It's just they're not in school every day. I mean, obviously, it's a homeschool situation. They don't have the oversight or the weight room or any of those things that he can just go to and they can set up a time for him to go work with their strength coach. None of that exists. So it's really just been Danny as the driving force to being the player he is. And when he gets with guys like Miguel Chavis and Brent Venables and Todd Bates and all those guys, I think he's going to flourish and probably do so fairly quickly.
Very good. That is kind of a little bit of a recap of things that happened last week. I know that we didn't join you, but wanted to make up for it and wanted to kind of have that discussion. All in all, Oklahoma ends the 2024 cycle, which, I guess technically, Josh, it's so weird to talk about this these days. We do have a technically National Signing Day coming up, but if you're looking back at the 2024 group, they finished another top 10 class, another kind of notch in Brent Venables' belt, if you will, as far as what he's been able to do in the recruiting rankings and the, just recruiting overall in general here over the first 3 years in Norman, or the first three classes in Norman. So quickly, things move ahead, though, and you had a junior day, this past weekend, technically the second elite junior day for Oklahoma, and there was some good news as 2025 Cypress Texas Bridgeland High School offensive tackle Ryan Fadje becomes the 10th member of the Oklahoma recruiting class in the 2025 class, the second offensive lineman commitment. We've talked about how important that is. He joins Melissa, teammate of Nigel Smith, Owen Hollenbach, as the second offensive lineman in that 10-person class so far. We've talked about him on the program before. It was somebody that you went and saw this past season along with his teammate, Jonte Newman. How big of a get is this? I think that there's some people that probably look at the, just the 3 stars next to his name. It's another kind of star discussion, but is this one of those great examples of turn on the tape, you see what you get?
Yeah, and this is a guy that I understand. There are a lot of things that you can watch with certain players, and you're like, I don't see it. I don't know what I'm missing here. With Ryan Fadje, like, even if say you're a basketball fan, you can watch him and see, oh, guys don't move like that at 270 pounds, 16, 17-year-old kids. This is a guy that I saw for the first time last summer when he came up to Oklahoma's camp and worked out. His teammate, like you mentioned, Jonte Newman, picked up an offer at that camp, and Ryan didn't. Now, about a month later, Oklahoma became his first scholarship offer. And, for those who haven't read the story, I was talking to Ryan kind of while he was waiting to announce his decision, and we're just doing kind of a quasi interview. And, I said, when did you kind of know, man? Did you know going into this trip you were going to commit? And he goes, I knew when they offered me I was going to commit. And I'm like, well, that's going to lead the story. That's a great quote. But that is, I think a large part of that is he knows the kind of player he is. This is a guy that's going to need a year to redshirt. He's going to need some time to add some mass to his body because, like I said, he's probably 265, 270. I've talked to him. I think when he arrives on campus, he'd like to be about 285, kind of pushing into the right range, but not there yet. I think he doesn't want to put on a bunch of bad weight. You can see him now. I mean, he looks like a power forward. He's really well put together, but you watch him move and how, like, look at his knee bend, how natural he is changing direction. He's more physical than I think people would want to believe he is. He'll put his hands on you. He'll finish a block. But I mean, like I said, just look right there. Yeah, look at him reset his base, drive that guy back inside. Like, it's there's so much to learn here, and that's just true of any offensive lineman. But the raw physical tools are pretty high end. I mean, like I know talking to some people a couple of months ago, Jonte Newman is the guy that everybody talks about with Bridgeland. He's more well known. He's probably got a little bit bigger offer list. But if you told me like one guy has the higher potential, I would say it's Fadje. And I know there are some people that disagree with me on that. But again, I'm just talking about movement skills and overall athleticism. And I think he's very high end in that way.
Josh, he's playing tackle here in this video. I think he's listed on 3 as maybe interior offensive lineman. Where do you think he ends up playing at OU?
I think he's a tackle all day. And I get why people are kind of, I've had some people ask me the same question, George. And I think the thinking is, well, Oklahoma's in on all these, the highly ranked guys, the Haywoods, the Rogers, the Babalolas, the Susi, all those guys. So, well, he's got to be a guard. And I'm not saying he couldn't grow into that, but to kind of continue the conversation, I was just mentioning, if one of the two Bridgeland guys was going to move inside, I think it's Newman. He's bigger, kind of bigger in his base. He's a little wider, not as naturally explosive and athletic. Like to me, I mean, Fadje is the kind of guy that you say, oh, that's a left tackle someday. Like that he moves like that kind of guy. That's one of those guys that you watch go to the combine, and the guy I always think of is Trent Williams. When you watch him slide and turn his feet and his hips, you're like, holy crap, that's the dancing bear that you hear coaches talk about. And he's got to continue to put on weight and maintain those movement skills. But to me, he's a guard all day a tackle all day. But with a guard, it's possible. He's big enough. Like, it could happen. But I think at that point, you're talking about a couple of years as a project, kind of trying to work into that range. But right now, again, I kind of see him not too dissimilar from where I saw Logan Howland a couple of years ago, that I really like the natural traits, but it was just, how is he going to put on weight? How is he going to carry that? How will that affect those movement skills that I like so much? Will it slow him down, or can he naturally put on weight and, it be comfortable for him?
Perhaps taboo a little bit on the Crimson Quarter to say this, but it seems like it's been a good week and a half for Bill Beatenbow. I mean, you look up and Tyler Guyton's been incredibly good down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Andrew Rame had a really good week down there. And then, we've talked about how important this 2025 class is going to be, specifically on the offensive line. And now you look up and you have commitments from a pair of kids from Texas, and certainly an area and a recruiting ground that you hope to get more good news from in that 2025 offensive class, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an area that is huge for Oklahoma, and obviously this helps them in the pursuit of Jonte Newman. I mean, they're teammates, they're buddies, and when I went and talked at the game I went to and I saw them during the season, I think that was late October, their comments were very similar, very much in lockstep. Fadje talked about, Oklahoma's kind of my top team, and Newman basically said the same thing. So I think Oklahoma's in good shape. Obviously, you're talking about an area that's about an hour from Texas A&M. So, I mean, that's very, very North Houston. So A&M's always going to be a factor in those kind of recruitments. Now, we'll have to see what Elko's staff does, how they are as recruiters. It's a little bit different setup than what we've become accustomed to. But we know A&M's going to be a presence. We know they're going to have strong NIL, all the things you want to talk about that we all know about with A&M. They're going to be present. So that'll be interesting. But then, I mean, you move to Dallas, where Oklahoma has more of that kind of home ground advantage. Lamont Rogers, he was up there for the first junior day. From everything he told me, loved it. The most interesting story probably was his father actually came in from Mississippi and then made the trip up to where, I guess I should explain, Lamont originally being from Mississippi. He made that trip up from Mississippi, went with Lamont and his mother to Norman. His mother's only made one other visit, and that was to USC, and this was the first visit his father has made with the family. So I think that gives you some indication of where Oklahoma kind of is in this recruitment. I think this is a Oklahoma LSU battle with Lamont Rogers. I think that's kind of the one to keep an eye on. And then you have Ty Haywood at Denton Ryan, and you have Michael Fasusi at Louisville. Ty Haywood has talked with us about his love for Bill Bedenbaugh, how much he thinks of the program. And Michael Fasusi, very much the same, even recently mentioned to another OU site that there was he had a great Missouri visit that a lot of people kind of got up in arms about, and he still came back and said, no, Oklahoma's still my number one school. So there is, there's a lot there that lends itself to Oklahoma, not least of which being his former teammate Jaden Hardy is now a freshman safety at Oklahoma. So, guys, it feels like the pieces are in place for OU. They're going to have to do it. Again, I keep saying it. It's like the defensive line in 2024. They've got to finish the job.
Josh, just real quickly, I know they took, 5 guys in the 2024 class on the offensive line. How many, what's the number do you think that OU and Bill Bedenbaugh wants to get to? Because I know they're kind of rebuilding that offensive line class right now. I mean, what number do you, and this is such a talented class, you just named all those guys. What number do you think they want to get to?
I think probably the minimum is 6. Like I would, I mean, and again, and I know I keep saying it. The parallels between 2024 defensive line and 2025 offensive line are so great, much in the way that about this time last year, we were all talking about the rumors we were hearing where OU was willing to take 8 defensive linemen if they could get them, if they could get the right guys. And they were close to pulling that off at various points. But with the offensive line, it's not going to be that big. But I mean, if you told me they got 7 guys, I wouldn't be shocked, because I think if that's the case, they're going to be really good guys. Like, because it's one of those things where, okay, let's say you get Michael Fasusi to go with Ryan Fadje and Owen Hollenbeck. Okay, then you get Lamont Rogers, who I think Oklahoma's in really good shape with. You're not telling on Andrew Babalola or Ty Haywood, no, if those guys want to come too, they're coming. Like, and that is a problem you will sort out at a later time. But when you can get that many elite guys, which I want to be clear, they won't. This will not happen. But if you can, you're going to leave that door open. So I think that's the reality. My guess is, like I said, I would guess 5 or 6. I'm going to guess the 6 will be dependent on what it is at offensive tackle, because I think if they could get 4 offensive tackles, 3 more along with Fadje, that's what they'd love to do. I think 3 is probably more realistic. I think it's probably what's going to happen, but they know the need. They know they have a huge need at offensive tackle. The numbers are just not where they need them to be. Guys, I mean, they're going into next season with 5 scholarship offensive tackles at the moment. And 3 of those are freshmen in Akinkunmi, Logan Howland, and Isaiah Autry.
I know we've said it before, but it's just it's almost a little bit mind-blowing that Bill Bedenbaugh is about to have back-to-back years in which he's put out first-round draft picks in Anton Harrison, obviously, a year ago going to the Jaguars, and then wherever Tyler Guyton ends up. It's just crazy. Like, at some point, you got to be able to land some of these guys, and it's going to be interesting to track that moving into, obviously the offseason, the summer, and then most certainly into, what will be a very, very interesting 2024 for a bunch of these high school kids out there. Got to be able to land them in, the 2025 class. Some of the big news coming out over the weekend, Josh, you put in a 5-star prediction, a name that I think that a lot of Oklahoma fans have become familiar with here over the course of really, truly the last couple months, maybe the entirety of the last year, and that is 2025 Galveston, Texas Ball High School linebacker safety Jonah Williams. You've put in a prediction for him. This is on the heels of last weekend's Junior Day. I guess we'll just start here in terms of Jonah Williams. Why now for Jonah Williams? Were you ready to make that prediction?
Coming out of that initial Junior Day back on January 27th, and like you said, Eddie, apologize for us not having, me not being around the following week to do anything and kind of cover some of that Junior Day. But talking to people, it sounded like that visit went extremely well. And you just got the vibe like, okay, maybe this can all come together. And I know some of it is his relationship with Brandon Hall. Some of it is the production Oklahoma has with kind of, like you said, linebacker, safety, kind of hybrid type players under Brent Venables, how well he's done with those kind of guys and, producing them as draft picks and those kind of things. At the same time, much like we talked about with Taylor Tatum, James Nesta, some of these other guys before, also the relationship with the baseball staff that I, obviously Eddie, you're more familiar with than I am. So there is a lot at play here that Oklahoma's really kind of hit the right notes. But it was one of those deals where this is a 5-star. Like, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself. Well, then a week passes and I get back, kind of in the swing of things, and you start hearing Texas sources that are like, yeah, Texas doesn't feel great about where this thing is right now, yada, yada, yada. And you're like, okay, so I'm just going to go ahead. Now, I wanted to be very clear. My expectation was never that I was going to put in the prediction and then 2 days later he was going to announce for Oklahoma. And as we've all seen, Jonah Williams has definitely noticed the predictions that have come in. I think there's 3 in the On3 network now, obviously including myself. So there's a lot that can still happen. And I know not everyone is nuts about the fact I put in this prediction. Jonah probably included in that group, but he and I've talked like it's there's nothing uncomfortable about it. It's just one of those deals where, no guy likes to have people feel like they know what's going on with him. Especially high school guys, they want to be mysterious. They want to surprise you. They want to be out of left field. So that is the fine line you have to walk sometimes.
It is kind of interesting too, when you add in the baseball stuff, which I guess a little bit taken aback by just how talented he is on the baseball field. I had somebody mention to me, over the course of the weekend that they wouldn't be surprised at all if he really wanted to be a baseball player. He could be a first-round type draft pick. Now, obviously, there's a long way to go for that, but the ability for what Oklahoma has begun to really kind of put together, and I think probably it was led by Kyler Murray and the plan that they put in place. Now you have Taylor Tatum and James Nesta joining the baseball and the football programs. It's a really big positive, I think, that they're able to get both Skip Johnson and Brent Venables on the same page and really kind of offer something that is unique in a way that maybe some other schools haven't been able to do. But at the same time, when we're talking about Jonah Williams, the football player, we got the highlights running right here, Josh. It was somebody that you went and saw. What is the high? Like, obviously, he's a 5-star talent, but how good could Jonah Williams be? And specifically, how good could a Jonah Williams be in Brent Venables' defense? Or I guess Zach Alley's defense, excuse me.
Yeah, hey, put some respect on it there, Eddie. But no, with Jonah, again, the game I went to see, I believe, if I'm trying to go from memory here, he had a blocked field goal. He returned, I believe it was a kickoff for a touchdown, had an interception, and I think caused a fumble and picked it up and returned it for a touchdown. If I remember all, and then he scored one on offense too. Like, he was, obviously wasn't playing a great team, but was so far and away one of the 2 or 3 best performances I saw last year. He is a absolutely gifted football player and a guy that has all the tools that, probably about 6'3", 200 pounds, can really run. But he also has great instincts. He just sees it very well, and he's very calm, never looks out of control, never looks like, he's in any danger. Yeah, here's one of the big offensive plays here where he just turns the corner, stiff arms that guy, and then goes and scores. And again, just look at that guy, like his length, his movement. That's not normal. Now, the thing that a lot of people will kind of ask about with Jonah is safety linebacker. Oklahoma's telling him safety. And that's one of the reasons I think he's drawn to Oklahoma, is because they've been very upfront. We're going to start you at safety. We're going to see what happens. But if it doesn't work out at safety and Jonah's okay with the move, he's got the frame to carry 230 pounds and be your will linebacker and be a absolute freak doing it. So there's a lot of versatility in him. You guys know I talk about this all the time. If something doesn't work, he has a fallback plan that could be really, really good. And that's huge because, guys, we can talk through the years of OU players that, okay, it didn't work here, they moved him here. Lane Johnson kind of being, the number one
sure
that people will point at, is finding a guy that he's so talented that he's got to work out somewhere. He's just too gifted for it not to play out right.
Josh, do you have a comp for him? He looks like a guy. To me, he looks like a linebacker, like he's going to maybe end up playing there. But do you have anybody in mind that kind of reminds you of him?
There's not one that screams out at me. Now, I will say, trying to give people an idea of like physical, like skill set and overall size, a guy like Keenan Clayton wouldn't be a terrible comparison. Kind of like I said, started as a safety, ended up growing into a linebacker, ultra athletic as a linebacker, ended up, I think he was a second or third round pick, but just that kind of body type. Now, what I will say, Jonah is more instinctual than Keenan was. Like Keenan was kind of a lot of learned, and that, not that there's anything wrong with that. He got so much better as time went on. Jonah Williams is a guy that arrives on campus and they probably almost immediately find a role for him, kind of like what we saw with Peyton Bowen, where it just he's too smart and he's too good not to have on the field.
He looks kind of like Kyle Hamilton. Plays for the Ravens. He was a first-round pick a couple years ago from Notre Dame. I mean, I have no idea what the height and weight situation is, but if you're comparing to safeties, he kind of reminds me of him.
No, that's not bad at all, and it's probably a good and maybe more befitting comparison from this is his ceiling. Like that's where Jonah Williams can go, because again, to me, I think he can move like a safety. I think he can play there. It's just a matter of, does he just inherently and naturally put on 30 pounds in college, and 230 at a safety, that's a lot to ask of a guy, especially in this era with all the vertical passing and all the movement, all that's asked of a safety. You wonder how that fits and if that can hold. But again, I don't think from where he is right now, safety is an impossibility. But I know some schools kind of are now changing their tune and telling him, oh yeah, you can play some safety for us, when they know the second they get him on campus, linebacker is where they want to put it.
You heard it here, Jonah. Stay away from the beer freshman year. That'll avoid the freshman 15.
Was that a problem for you?
Yeah.
I was already fat when I got to college. Whatever. Just to add a little bit to, just in terms of the overall just athleticism of the family, I was, I guess, surprised. I didn't remember it. His brother was a second-round draft pick in 2012 of the Texas Rangers. So very, very talented family, and it'll be interesting to kind of track that as we move forward and see if he ends up joining the 2025 class. So just in terms of both Junior Day weekends, Josh, what kind of feedback have you gotten from guys just in terms of getting to know Zach Alley, kind of getting to know a little bit more about the program and everything that he is going to bring on the defensive side of the football with some of the guys that he has been able to talk to?
Yeah, you can tell the early reviews are really good. One of the guys that I notably talked to was Christian Jones, the linebacker from Omaha West Side. Now, he's from Omaha. Nebraska, I think he's visited Nebraska like 10 times. So, I mean, I'm not telling you that because of Zach Alley, Oklahoma is going to suddenly flip this around. I think Nebraska is still a very safe bet in his recruitment. But at the same time, you can tell that Alley made a really strong impression, really kind of laid out, this is what we see, this is what our vision is, this is who we're going to be, this is what we're about. And I think kids respond to that, especially linebackers, who we all know are just kind of type A, very, just very almost aggressive personalities. And I think Alley fits that very, very well from everything I've gathered. Some of the other linebackers, Elijah Barnes, the linebacker from Skyline, that a couple of weeks ago was set to go to the initial Junior Day, and I talked to him, and he really hadn't heard much since Ted Roof was let go and the change over to Zach Alley. So he really hadn't had a lot of contact with OU. Well, within a week, OU gets him on campus. He really liked Zach Alley, who had also come by his school and seen him. So again, I just think this is a guy that's going to make a lot of sense. Young, very active recruiter, very energetic. He's the kind of guy that kids respond to. And in particular, the position that he's going to be coaching, linebackers, he's the kind of guy that resonates with those guys.
Josh, last one from me. Lots of names that came in for Junior Day. We talked about quite a few of them. Any other guys that OU fans should keep an eye on in the next few weeks, or even coming up to the spring and summer, as guys that maybe really took another step towards maybe being close to committing to OU?
I don't know that I've got one that I would say, okay, yeah, he's right on the cusp. Tristan Haynes obviously is one from Carl Albert that I think we all feel like Oklahoma's in pretty good shape obviously with all the Carl Albert connections and those kind of things. But Tristan Haynes picked up a Georgia offer, an LSU offer recently. It doesn't feel like he's in any reason to be in a hurry because I think his stock is really soaring right now. One guy that I will say of all the guys I talked to, and this isn't really befitting of your question, but I think it's something people will want to hear, is Andrew Babalola, the big offensive tackle from Kansas. He made his second trip down. He came for a game last year, and then he came down again for the first junior day on January 27th. And I would say easily of all the guys I talked to from the 2 junior days, he was the most, I guess, outspoken in how much he enjoyed the trip, how much he really was surprised by what he saw, really loved everything about Oklahoma. Obviously, we know through the years Oklahoma's done an outstanding job recruiting Kansas, especially whenever Brent Venables has been on staff. They've done a really, really good job in that state. And I'm not going to go so far as to say Oklahoma took the lead or anything like that, but he hinted around that Oklahoma had made a big move for him, that there was absolutely a new perspective for him about OU, where they were. Couldn't wait to get back down. I think he's going to come down for spring practice and then probably set up his official visit in June, like we see Oklahoma do so much in this kind of new recruiting calendar. So I think they've really, really made a lot of headway with him, but I don't see a lot of guys that are just ready on the cusp of commitments. Guys, there's 10 guys already in the class. I mean, Oklahoma, I think, is looking at maybe somewhere between 22 and 24, kind of depending on, NFL departures, portal guys after the season, that kind of stuff. So it's not going to be a huge class. They're almost halfway there. So I think at this point, OU is kind of verifying, okay, this is where our focus is going to be at this position. This is who we're going to be really zeroed in on. So I don't think they're pushing too hard with most guys just yet. But I mean, again, 2 or 3 more guys, and they're over 50% done with what should be their 2025 class.
I don't want to make you go through an entire spiel, but you did mention the recruiting calendar, and I know that's something that we might approach on over on Soonerscoop.com here in the coming days. Just in terms of, I guess it's not a yes or no question, but it's how big is this become a problem just in terms of the recruiting calendar and having to look at everything that goes into, really truly kind of that first week of December where, and Brent's talked about it in terms of preparing for a bowl game, but yet you're still trying to re-recruit your roster. You're still trying to, finish off whatever recruiting class is going to sign in that early signing period. It seems to me that it has become a big issue, and it's maybe the number one issue right now in terms of, college football and of everything that's going on out there with the NCAA. It seems like that would be a priority for them to look at here moving forward.
I think this is one of the most controllable things the NCAA could do to help its product, is finding a way to get this calendar under some sort of control. Because I understand with the portal, it kind of has to happen in December. To me, there's really no way that you can make that work with the way semester guidelines are for the classes, those kind of things. It just kind of has to fall there. Like, you understand that. So when you talk to coaches, guys, there are, and I know you guys know it too, there are guys that are going from August 1st to this February signing day who haven't had a day off in that whole period of time. And I get it. They're making a lot of money and there's big paychecks and all that stuff. I understand it. These guys have families. Like, they have kids that are young and they want to spend time with. God, I just got back from Disney. I can relate to it. Like, there is, you're going to burn these guys out. Like, you're going to lose talent. Now, I think there's a lot of hype around some of that. I mean, not every guy can go coach in the NFL. That's not the way it's going to work. So if they want to, unless they want to take a huge pay cut and coach high school, you're going to get a lot of guys that are just kind of stuck. But is that the way you get your best product out there for as the NCAA or college football's decision makers? No, of course it's not. So again, I'd like them to look at maybe like an August signing period for those guys that want to be done, that are committed. And, we're talking about Oklahoma with 10 guys committed. Those guys could probably sign in August or December and it wouldn't make any difference. They kind of know what they're doing. And then just go back to February. And, you can make allowances, you can make some changes. Okay, if a head coach leaves, kind of like the portal stuff, your NLI is not binding. You can move around, so you can do things, and I think it will help coaches manage their time, not be so burned out, not just be beholden to the clock and recruiting their own players and all the other stuff they're going to have to do until the portal can kind of be clarified. But this can help them have a little time to themselves, have a little time with their family, and manage things a little more easily.
Look forward to kind of diving into that, because I do think that it is something that you talk to any coach out there. There's plenty of coaches on the record, and there's plenty of coaches off the record that this has become a little bit of a problem for just about everybody in college football, and particularly at the higher levels of the sport. Real quick before we get out of here, George, I know that there was some movement yesterday. Jay Nunez leaving Oklahoma to go to Alabama to be the special teams coach. It's a little bit interesting for me just because I guess to kind of throw it out there, that if you didn't know, Jay Nunez was the special teams coach, but he was technically an analyst. He wasn't a part of he was a part of the coaching staff, but he wasn't a part of like the recognized 10 coaching assistant staffs. What was I trying to say there? You get the idea. You're the ones out there that are dealing with me. Full-time assistant. Thank you, Carrie Murdoch, in my ear. Appreciate it. Just in terms of, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think everybody kind of looks at what the special teams have been here over the last 2 years, and maybe this is a good thing.
Yeah, look, I don't think this was something that Oklahoma wanted. I think they clearly wanted Jay Nunez to remain on staff. Otherwise, they would have fired him after the season.
Sure.
And also, he was hired away by Alabama, and anytime you're hired away from Alabama, somebody must think you're pretty good at your job. And I know Nick Saban's not there, but that's a pretty impressive staff that DeBoer's put together there already for the Crimson Tide. So I don't think this was something that Oklahoma necessarily wanted to happen, but you do look at the numbers from last year, and we all know from watching the games, they just were not very good on special teams. I think they ranked 94th in the country in S&P Plus, which is advanced analytics on where they were on special teams. They were really bad in punt return. I think 95th in the country in punt return average. We all know Gavin Freeman had struggles. They weren't much better in kick return. I think they were somewhere in the 80s in kick return. Their punting got a little bit better because they switched over to Luke Elzinga, and then obviously a field goal kicker. They just didn't have the bodies there. Zach Schmidt wasn't very good, especially from long distance. So I don't think this is going to be a huge change, right? It'll be interesting to see if they bring in an analyst to kind of take over that role. Maybe they let Zach Alley do some of that. People forget he was the special teams coordinator for Boise State, as well as the linebackers coach in 2020. He ended up winning special teams coordinator of the year, named by Football Scoop that year. So he had a really good special teams unit there in Boise State the 1 year he did it. I don't know if that's too much to put on his plate. I still don't know what exactly his role is going to be defensively, but I do think that Oklahoma will probably hire somebody from the outside to come in and at least help in some fashion. Whether if it's Zach Alley running the show and somebody else helping him as an assistant, something like that. But I guess it is a little bit of a blow. It depends on how you look at it. I mean, I think we all look at it and go, well, they weren't very good anyways on special teams. Oklahoma views it as, I think that they feel like they can still be better there. And Nunez was kind of had an idea of how they were going to fix that.
It'll be interesting to kind of track that and see, and most specifically because, as you mentioned, George, like the Zach Alley thing's really interesting. He's done a really good job managing special teams.
Yep.
But then are you like adding too much to his plate when he's supposed to be coming in to take things off of Brent Venables' plate as far as calling the defense? It's going to be something that is certainly interesting to watch, and certainly something that we'll be tracking here through spring on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page right here, as well as over on the main side on Soonerscoop.com with the On3 Network. So big basketball game coming up on Tuesday evening. Oklahoma, a big week, really. Oklahoma coming up with BYU on Tuesday night, one of the top offenses in the country, one of the better teams in the country if you look at net rating or Ken Pom. And then obviously that kind of boils into or goes into Saturday with the first edition of Bedlam. It's been a good couple weeks for Jenny Baranchek and the Oklahoma women. They come off of a Bedlam victory over the weekend on Saturday. And oh, by the way, you have a softball team that's starting their season on Thursday, going for its fourth consecutive national title. Baseball a week from Friday down at Arlington over at, I think, is that Rangers Stadium now?
I think
so.
The
world champion Rangers. So they'll be in the background as the Cubs go for one this year. Who's your team, Josh? I know that you flip-flop every other year.
This year I remain with the Astros. My
Interesting.
declaration early on.
Cheaters.
Yeah.
Cheaters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. All right, Josh. Well, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. George and I think if we can, we're going to probably try to do another one of those live streams that we did maybe on Thursday night, looking to get back into the swing of things, doing that, connecting with you guys, taking questions from you guys as, really we kind of entered kind of one of those territories where it's like full basketball, spring sports firing up. And before you know it, we'll all be joining in mid-April for not the spring game, but the Masters. Come on, folks. For George, for Josh, I'm Eddie. We will talk to you next time.